Hello YouTube, this video is going to be on a complete disassembly of Model 1911 pistol. This video is not going to cover all possible variations of Model 1911 platform, but it should serve as a good basis for a complete disassembly of one. We'll begin this disassembly with making sure that the firearm is unloaded. We'll take out the magazine, set it aside, and then verify that the chamber is clear. At this point we can set the pistol on safe, because this will help us depress the spring plug. Let's look at the front of the pistol. In my case, I am using a two-piece guide rod. So in order for me to disassemble or take the slide off the frame, I have to remove one piece of the guide rod. First, if you have a different setup, you may be able to simply depress the spring plug and then turn the bushing. But what I'm going to do is take out one half of my guide rod first and set that aside. Now we can depress the spring plug and start turning the bushing over. As you can see right here, you go clockwise. Now while holding the plunger, I'm going to turn the bushing all the way off to the side and then slowly release the spring plug like so. Now I can take the spring plug off. Now that the plug has been removed, what we're going to do is take the pistol off safe, move the slide back to where the first notch on the slide aligns with the slide stop, like so. Then we're going to look at the other side of the pistol and notice that there's a button or a pin protruding. We're going to depress that, and we'll notice that the slide stop can now be lifted, just like that. Now that the slide stop is gone, we can move the slide all the way forward and off the frame. At this point we can remove the rest of the guide rod and the spring. You'll notice that I'm using a bushing on mine. You can take the spring off of the guide rod and notice that the spring has two different ends. I guess the easiest way to describe it is the neat end goes towards the end of the guide rod, whereas the open end goes under the spring plug. In order to remove the bushing and the barrel, you need to turn the bushing the other way so that its locking detent right here can come out of the slide. And at this point you can either remove the bushing by itself or leave it on the barrel, and then lower the link of the barrel, lift the barrel slightly and start moving it out of the slide. Just make sure that the link is lowered, and then you can take it all the way out of the slide, just like that. Now let's look at the back of the slide. What we have here is the back plate or lock plate that holds the firing pin and the extractor inside the slide. What we're going to need to do is depress the firing pin and then at the same time slide the plate off. Now hold your finger over the firing pin when you're sliding the plate all the way off, otherwise it will jump out. So as you can see, I'm about to take the plate off completely, like so, and I caught the firing pin. Now we can take the firing pin off or out, and it'll come with its spring. You'll also notice that this spring is crimped on one side, and that's the side that goes onto the firing pin, and it sits there tightly. We'll set that aside. Now we can take out the extractor. The extractor you take out by simply pulling on it from the back, like so, and then taking it out completely. Now we'll move on to the frame. In order to disassemble this entire frame, what I like to do first is take the tension off of this assembly, basically here, and you do that by removing the mainspring housing and the sear spring. First, we're going to hold the hammer and allow it to go forward by pulling the trigger. Then I'm going to take my bench block and knock out this pin in the back of the frame. I'm going to use a brass punch. Knock it out completely. My pin is right here. Now I'm going to hold the mainspring housing while removing my punch, because it's still under some tension, and then allow it to slowly move back. We're going to cock the hammer, which will push the mainspring housing even further, and we'll start removing the thumb safety. Inside this tube there's a plunger with a spring, so we want to make sure that as we're removing the thumb safety, we don't allow that plunger to simply exit the frame. The thumb safety can be removed in the middle position between fire and safe. In my case, I don't have an ambidextrous thumb safety, so I'll only be removing it from left side. Again, keeping your thumb over the back end of the frame, I'm going to depress on the right side of the pin, and while moving the thumb safety kind of in the middle position between fire and safe, I'm going to start lifting it towards myself, like that, and continue lifting slowly. And lift it out completely. Now we can remove this plunger, its spring, and the other side. We can also take out the beaver tail safety, and then remove mainspring housing completely. A quick note about the mainspring housings. You see that mine has a pin right in this section. This pin holds the plunger, the spring, and the other plunger inside the mainspring housing. You can see that pin right there. My original mainspring housing that came on my mil spec didn't have a pin going through it. So if I were to try to remove the mainspring housing, everything, all the components inside would try to come out. So before disassembly, if you don't have a pin here, if all you see is a hole, which is different actually from the lock mechanism that's usually down here. If you don't see a pin in this little hole right here at the top of the mainspring housing, what you need to do is use a paper clip or a small punch before trying to remove it. Cock the hammer, put the pin through here, which will serve as this pin holding the plunger, then decock the hammer, and that will take the tension off the hammer, and then remove mainspring housing out of your frame. Okay, I'm going to show you how to disassemble this in a second. Okay, so now we can move the hammer strut out of the way, and then take the sear spring and move it out of the gun. I'm just going to grab it by one of its leaves or one of its legs and lift it out. What we have left now are two pins right here, one for the hammer and one for the sear and disconnect. And what we're going to do, these pins are loose, so you don't have to use a hammer to drive them out. You can see that I can simply push them out. Well, there's the hammer pin. We can now take the hammer out. If you want to take the strut off, there's one pin right here that you need to drive out, and you'll be able to remove the strut from the hammer in case you're replacing your strut, or if you want to work on it. The sear pin holds the sear and the disconnect in place, and I'll show you that in a second. I took the pin out. Here's the disconnector, moves up and down and protrudes through the frame on top, and here's the sear right here. Okay, so when you're reassembling your pistol, this is how the sear and the disconnector come together. On the Springfield Armory frames, I guess I can't speak for all of them, but on mine, you notice that there is no ejector cross pin going through the frame, and my ejector can simply be lifted if the thread locking compound used by the factory has basically been worn enough. So if your frame has a pin going through right about this area inside the rail, you need to drive it out first if you're replacing your ejector. These grip screw bushings, you can try to remove them, but I would recommend using a special tool, because when I tried to remove them with a screwdriver, I actually started stripping the top area of the bushing. So you rarely need to remove them, but if you do need to, make sure you're using a proper tool. Let's look at the other side of the frame. What we're going to take out now is the magazine lock or release, magazine catch. You'll notice that on one side it has a slotted screw, and on the other is the button that you depress to remove the magazine. What we're going to do is, using an appropriate size screwdriver, position it in the slot of the screw. We're going to, on the other side, press on the magazine release until we can easily turn the screwdriver counterclockwise, like so. Then the entire assembly will come out. Here's what we just did. You see that little tab inside this channel? This tab, let me show you inside the frame here. This tab used to go inside the frame in this channel. What we did was simply turn it out of this channel and locked it inside the magazine release. To take the magazine release apart completely, you simply turn the tab over back to where it used to be, and then you'll see it leave its channel here, and then you'll be able to remove the tab and the pin and the spring from inside the magazine release assembly. With the magazine release gone, you can now push the trigger towards the back and use its bow in the back here to remove it completely. What I'm going to use is a punch to assist in pulling it out, just like that, and there's your trigger. Now I'll show you how to disassemble the mainspring housing. It's really nice to have this bench block because it has this one little protrusion on it that I use to depress the plunger inside the mainspring housing. So what I'm going to do is position my mainspring housing in such a way where the pin will come out into this channel on the bench block. When you're trying to disassemble the mainspring housing, I'll try to show you a little bit better. So there's that pin I was talking about holding the plunger in place. We'll start removing this pin from the outside towards the inside because you'll see that this pin has a head on it. What I like to use is the bench block that has this little protrusion on it. I believe it's made specifically for this, for the removal or disassembly of mainspring housing, because you'll see that this protrusion allows me to depress the plunger inside the mainspring housing, and this channel on the bench block allows for the pin to move back. So what I'm going to do is place my mainspring housing over that protrusion. Let's see if I can show you what I'm doing. I'm going to depress the plunger by moving the mainspring housing down, and then I'm going to use a punch of the right size and move the pin all the way out towards the back. And sorry you couldn't see that, but here I just pushed it all the way out. There's that pin. My punch is now holding the plunger. So what I'm going to do is hold over the mainspring housing opening while I'm removing my punch, just like that, and then you'll be able to take out your components from inside. So here's the top plunger, and I see if I can remove all of them together. There you go. So here's the bottom plunger right here, spring, and the top plunger right there. The reason why the mainspring housing pin, that large pin with a channel, is hard to remove is because the channel is what this bottom plunger goes into. You see how it's pointed? Just like that.